welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris.
All right, Rachel, here's what I got for you this week. So, I get to travel around sometimes and do presentations. I know you do too. Sometimes we get to do them together. Thank you if you've had us before. I'm sure we've had a wonderful time. We've never had a bad time doing it, right? Something that I think I've learned by traveling around is that different people and different organizations and different school districts are in different places, right? Obviously physically different places, but where they are in their technology journey or their inclusive journey or where they are with AAC, like for instance, how often have you and I talked about core words on this podcast, right? We sort of we had to bring it in over the summer as an old episode because we don't talk about it anymore. We sort of assume that most people know about core words, right? And there's many things like that, strategies like that, or if it's not a strategy, just something in our sphere that I now sort of take for granted because, I got some gray in this beard, right? And I realized, doesn't everybody know this? And I recently had one of those experiences where it was like, no, okay, I have to take a step back because I just assumed. So let me explain. I was recently talking to a group of people and I said, like when you have some text and you hit the text on a piece of paper, you can't hit a play button and have it read out loud, but when it's in an accessible version, you can hit a play button and the text can be read out loud with a text-to-speech tool. And I could see this small group of people, their eyes sort of glaze over. And I was like, did I lose you? Do you know what text-to-speech is? And they're like, shaking people can't see me. You see them, they're sort of slowly shaking their head back and forth. I'm like, okay, well, text can be read out loud if it's in a certain format. If you take a picture of text, there's work that has to be done to convert it, but that can be done. But just in general, most text, like online, on a website or whatever, you hit a play button and it can be text read out loud. They had not heard of that. And so then I start bringing up tools and I show them like read and write. It's like our school district has read and write for every kid. Anyone can have it so that they can have text aloud. You guys have Chromebooks here? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, it's free. Like that version of it is free. So any kid could have it. Have you heard of Immersive Reader? And they're like, again, no, Chris, what is Immersive Reader? I'm like, well, that's Microsoft has partnered with different groups and different websites and different organizations, and it's all in the Microsoft tools. That also is their text-to-speech tool, and it does these other things as well. You and I have looked at some of that here on the podcast. You can go back and listen to some of the archives, even not that long ago when I was showing you Microsoft Reader, remember? And we made a little video that's on Patreon if people want to go see it. But that's a reading coach. Sorry, that's what I meant, reading coach. Well, Reading Coach works with Immersive Reader. So long story short, this is not talking about Immersive Reader or Read and Write for Google Chrome. Whatever your text-to-speech tool is, I feel like if you're listening to this podcast right now and you don't know what your text-to-speech tool is, that is priority number one. Like it is so useful to so many people to have your text read out loud, to confirm that whatever you're reading with your eyes, you can confirm it with your ears, assuming you have the ability to hear. And even if you don't, there's dual highlighting, so you can track along. So what dual highlighting is the back of the, as the text-to-speech is playing, a word is highlighted, and the dual part is the entire sentence is highlighted. So if you're tracking with your eyes, you're like, oh, here's where I am on the screen. My eyes are tracking along, and this is the sentence that I'm on, and this is the word that's being spoken out loud as it's spoken out loud, so I can track it. And even that has helped, even if you do have a hearing impairment. So to me, it's like, if someone said, what's the number one thing I need to change or have on my computers in an educational setting to make it more inclusive, but really just to help any kid learn anything, text-to-speech would be one of those things, which is why I was like, this far into my career, I sort of make these, like, everybody knows that, but I have to realize, no, everyone's in a different place in their journey, and so they're just hearing about it now. They're hearing about it for the first time. There's probably people listening to this podcast right now who are hearing about it for the first time, and that's all okay, because you're hearing about it, right? What's not okay is if you don't hear about it.
Yes, and I bet you there's some people out they're listening who have heard about it, who haven't actually tried it. Because I feel like and that was me for a while, right? I was like, okay, yeah, text-to-speech, that sounds great. It is so immensely useful and powerful to students. I have to tell you, in my own clinical work, just having that visual with that auditory, we know that combination can be really powerful for students. And I've seen such amazing things happen when we utilize those accessibility features. And I definitely recommend, if you're the person who knows about text-to-speech who hasn't tried it, just dive in and start seeing what happens when you use it with your students. It's so powerful, and I agree, Chris. I feel like sometimes we're in this little assistive technology bubble where we're like, everybody knows about these things, right? And everybody, unfortunately, doesn't.
Yeah. I wonder how many places around the country, and maybe other countries, where someone might have the accommodation of text read out loud. And that, to them, that means a human sitting next to them reading it out loud. And that feels like well, okay, maybe you're employing somebody that way, but also the person that you're reading to doesn't have as much autonomy if they had access to the software, and if you taught them how to use that software.
Chris, yes. I literally just probably 6 months ago met a student who had a paraprofessional next to them all day reading out loud for them. And I was just like, wait a second. This student is a teenager now. And I saw him for an assistive technology consult. And I said, like, how would you like to be able to hear things read to you on your own without having someone read it? And like, he was super excited. He loves cars. And I said, okay, he loves to go to like the car museum. And then I worked on like, okay, you can actually take a picture of this plaque and then have it read out loud. And so it's just like a perfect example of how people, yes, take it verbatim, like have text read out loud. It's like we now have the technology to read it out loud, which again, just gives individuals more autonomy, and they can learn to become more independent in those, endeavors. And the other thing I'll mention, actually, Chris, which is fun, it's always fun when you can introduce some type of like accessibility feature to like your friends or your family. And I was in Guatemala, and we were in a situation where we were at this I think we're at like a museum or something, and it was like, we have some cursory knowledge of Spanish, but there were like some words that we didn't understand. And I was like, hold on, guys. And I like take a picture on my iPhone, and then I tap the text, and then of course it highlights it. And people are like, whoa, I didn't even know you could do that. I was like, just wait. And then I translated it. And, this took a matter of seconds to do this. And, I could have had it read out loud. But it's just like, it's really fun when you can introduce something like this to friends, especially in a situation where everyone's like, well, I guess we just can't understand. I'm like, no, like we can. And so it's really fun when things like that pop up in your everyday life, and you can kind of share some of those accessibility features with people.
Yeah, for sure. When I was leaving this experience with these people, and I got in my car and I was realizing, what are some things in my life that I just haven't experienced yet? Like, they have not experienced text-to-speech yet. I introduced it to them, just like you introduced to your friends there, the translate feature and taking pictures and having it, the AR, where it will, the augmented reality will convert the text from one language to another. And I just realized, what are some things that are in my future that I'm going to learn more about, right? And something that occurred to me is like, we have these life experiences. I'll give you a quick example. My wife, her mother has epilepsy. And so she grew up with understanding seizures and how to help control or mitigate or otherwise live with seizures and how to communicate it, where I didn't, right? So as I got, closer with my wife when we were dating and meeting her parents, suddenly I knew more, but I didn't know more before then, right? And I'm just very curious, like, what's the next thing I'm going to learn, right? Like, it's so exciting that way.
Chris, that leads us perfectly into our interview today. I had the pleasure of having Anand and Amanda Murthy, who actually are clients of mine. They've been in my practice for a couple years now, but they are coming onto the podcast to talk all about infantile spasms. Their son Maverick has had such a hard journey in the area of seizures, and he's been through, countless medical trials and brain surgeries, and they come on as advocates to kind of just share and empower about infantile spasms specifically, because they have learned a lot. They have a really amazing doctor that they work with in LA, and of course then talk all about their journey with their son Maverick and AAC and all the things. So I'm really excited to share the interview that I did with Anand and Amanda Murthy.
This October, join Impact Voices and the AAC community in Arlington, Virginia. Hello, I am Lance McLemore, a board member of Impact Voices. Don't miss our second Live AAC Hangout and celebration at the Crystal Gateway Marriott on October 17th and 18th. Our theme is Building Futures Together to empower AAC users, connect policymakers, employers, and each other. Hear from AAC users who are shaping the future, explore our challenges and opportunities, and discover how we can all work together for a more inclusive world. Register today at impactvoices.org. We can't wait to see you and IV Live 2024.
Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined today by Amanda and Anand Murthy. You guys, I'm so excited to have you here. This podcast recording has been a long time in the making, and I'm really excited to dive in. Can you start off by just explaining a little bit about who you are and I guess how we know each other, because we know each other?
Yeah, no, totally. I think, you're obviously very involved with our son Maverick in speech and actually just kind of quarterbacking a lot of his services, which we're very grateful for. So our son Maverick, so Amanda and I are from LA. We live in LA, and our son Maverick at 6 months was diagnosed with a condition called infantile spasms, which is a rare form of epilepsy. So I believe there's 2,000 kids a year that are diagnosed with it. And it's a pretty devastating condition. And there aren't a lot of treatments. So, a handful of treatments work for some kids. Our son Maverick has had 3 brain surgeries. He's had periods of seizure freedom. We thought we were in a good place, and then the brainwaves started going haywire again, even though, knock on wood, we haven't seen identifiable seizures. But yeah, it's a journey, and you've helped us a ton. I think we met during COVID, so I think it was like 2020 or 21 or something like that.
Yeah.
And we have like a team of, I think, 15 people that work with our son to just try to make sure he has the best life that he can live. And he's 5.5, and he's made a lot of progress, but we have a long road ahead. So I guess that's the way to kind of set it up.
Yeah. I mean, we did meet a couple years ago now, and Maverick has been such a joy in a lot of ways to work with, and also such a puzzle. I think it's really hard when you're working with any child that has, neurological activity in the form of seizures, where we're building up skills, and then all of a sudden, we have some type of seizure activity that we are losing some of those skills. And so I feel like we've definitely had that kind of up and down journey together. For those, many of our listeners are practitioners, educators, parents, and many of us have experience working with children that have epilepsy and seizure disorders. Can you go into a little bit more detail around infantile spasms and how it might be different than other seizure disorders?
Okay, so yeah, infantile spasms usually typically starts between 6 to 10 months. They're a little bit subtle. So it's typically like a head drop, or an eye roll, or both together. They sometimes look with like their hands kind of going up in the air. I'm sort of startled. They are so young, the kids. So oftentimes, like parents, especially new parents, like we were, if you haven't had a child before, or if you aren't well versed in this or haven't seen it on the internet or Instagram or whatever, you don't know what it is. So it's pretty much looks like sort of like an infant, like, because infants can kind of just make weird faces and weird, like even my daughter, who's neurotypical, has done it multiple times, which scared the crap out of me. But she basically, I took a video and I showed it to my pediatrician, and he was able to diagnose it like pretty quickly because he had experience with it. The unfortunate like situation is many pediatricians don't have any sort of experience with it, even in medical school. And so it's really, really slight and really hard to diagnose unless you catch it on a video, you play it over and over again, and you really kind of push as a parent. So we didn't have that experience, but there's many people that we've connected with on Instagram and, friends of friends who've connected us with their kids who have infantile spasms or, other forms of epilepsy. And they all, there's many horror stories where they could go undiagnosed and the parents actually have to be like, no, something is wrong. It's been 4 months and this isn't stopping. And, so thankfully we weren't in that situation, but, it's a very rare condition, like kind of in quotation marks, but it also does affect, like Anand said, 2,000 kids a year. So it's not small. It's not insignificant at all by any means.
And explain a little bit about your experience with Maverick. How did it sounds like you captured it on video. You're like, this doesn't feel right. And then luckily your pediatrician had experience. Once you diagnose infantile spasms, then what happens?
So ours was pretty like, it was pretty lucky / I don't know. It was pretty horrendous, but I took a video, a few of them, and he looked really scared. And so we had actually gone the day before to his regular checkup. I think it was a 6-month checkup. And I took a video and he had to come back because I can't remember what it was. Maybe I had to get a shot. I don't know. He had to get one extra shot or something like that. And I went back and I was like, hey, can I just speak to my pediatrician just one more time? I just want to show him a really quick video. And I showed it to him, and pretty immediately he put his hand on my shoulder. I remember very distinctly, and said, I'm going to call you tonight. I'm going to call you tonight. And like, basically was like, it's okay, but like, I'm going to call you tonight. And so I walked home. I remember very vividly, like pushing the stroller back home, because we actually walked very close or lived very close to him. And called Anand and was like, something is very, very wrong. I could tell by the way he was responding to my question, the video, like I could see like he was stressed out. And Anand was like, no, I'm sure it's fine. It's fine. And then he actually did call us that night after Mav went to bed, probably like 7 hours later, and said, you don't have to go to the emergency room right now, but you need to be there by tomorrow morning, basically. And you need to get him in immediately. And I think he has infantile spasms. And if you Google it, it's like, oh my God, it's, death. It's, it's what we're dealing with. It's also is, one course of steroids and they're fine. So the range is so incredibly vast that it's a very scary thing as a parent to have dealt with, I guess, at that moment. But now, we're so deep. It's like, it's weird looking back at that.
Yeah. No, but I think to part of your question, what you do when you suspect seizure behavior is you have to get in and get an EEG immediately. And, we were lucky that one of my close friends is like a very talented like doctor. And he was kind of our sounding board through this entire to this day. So 5 years in, and he was like, literally he called like every neuro center in the country and was like, hey, you're in for a ride. Like, I'm just warning you, like, this is, I don't know how it's going to kind of develop, but you better be prepared. And it was very good advice because you know how the last 5 years have been. So I think it was very helpful to kind of just being told very bluntly, like, we don't know how to solve this yet.
And I guess just one more thing to touch on is that if you do suspect infantile spasms, you really have to push for an overnight EEG because they need that full data to sort of capture. Our son had hips arrhythmia, and he had infantile spasms. So hips arrhythmia is sort of like the background noise of his brain. It goes along with infantile spasms often. So his was easier to see, but often you need to actually catch a seizure on camera. So a lot of these parents I've also spoken to, like, oh, they'll go in for like a 2-hour EEG. They didn't see anything. They'll go in 2 months later and they're like, their kid's brain is completely, crazy and wild.
So there's a perfect example. This happened last week. One of my best friends, I haven't even told you this, Amanda, I'll keep the name out. His daughter had like fluttering eyes, and it kept happening. And they got very concerned. So they went to Stanford neurology to see what happens. And I said, there's no way clinically you can find out if the brain is not working the way it's supposed to. You need an EEG. And I was like, even if there's no concern, go get an EEG. Your insurance is going to pay for it as long as a doctor prescribes it, and just get it done and rule it out. Like, it's probably nothing, but if you guys are concerned, go get it done.
I feel like that's really good insight because oftentimes it's so easy. I feel like especially pediatricians are so quick to just be like, it's okay. Like, that's not a big deal. In the field of speech language pathology, we're always a little frustrated with pediatricians because they're always like, it's fine. We'll just wait and see. And then we miss valuable time. Obviously, in this situation, it can be life-threatening to not catch something like this. And so I think it's good insight to really push. If you think there's any type of, abnormal neurological activity, push for that EEG.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the only way you can measure the brain. There's no other way. Like, you can go to a doctor's office and they're like, oh, he looks fine. We've had some instances with pretty senior people at a hospital that were like, oh, he looks fine. And he was not fine.
Yeah.
No.
Totally. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, obviously you guys have been in this journey for 5 years now. Tell me a little bit about, some of the insights that you've gleaned. Obviously, there's families out there listening who have children who are medically, complex, medically fragile, have all types of different diagnoses. You guys are very familiar with the medical system and surgeries and all these things. I'm curious what you've kind of learned along the way and other things that would be helpful for families to advocate for educators to kind of take note of. I'm really curious about your kind of journey and things that you've learned.
Yeah. Do you want to start on it, or do you want me?
Sure. Yeah, no, I could start. I think the most important thing that I've learned in the last 5 years is we're lucky that we had outside people that were able to counsel us, like how I mentioned, like a very talented doctor that helped me and Amanda guide us through and basically vet every diagnosis and every treatment that we felt confident that we were getting the best care. So that's pretty unique, I think.
And just to like jump in there, he was able to vet because he has such a great network. He was able to vet at like all of the other neurological like hubs across America that he would really like rely on, like a friend of a friend's doctor who works here, like, kind of he was able to check across hospitals across the country. So that was, like Anand said, very valuable.
Yeah, because he basically talked to everyone around the country, Boston, Stanford, I think, whatever the hospital in UPenn or whatever. And he basically said, when it comes to infantile spasms, no one's going to override what Dr. Hussein says. And if Dr. Hussein says this, no one's going to say, do something different. And if he's recommending this surgery, they were like, he's the guy. So we're very fortunate that we got to the guy.
And very fortunate that we live a few miles away from him, because I said this in another podcast, but we would have definitely 100% moved. Like if we had to, we would have taken him to whoever we felt most confident with.
But the other thing that I've learned is how difficult insurance is for getting things approved, and how difficult that whole process is. And you just kind of have to be an asshole and just talk your shit and get it done, because these things are so expensive. They're so insanely and insurance companies hate Maverick, right? The three of us were normal, patients of, the healthcare system. They love us. They get to make all the money off our premiums. Maverick is their enemy, because that is who they actually have to spend money on.
Yeah.
And you have to just basically, you have to be really strong with these insurance companies, and even getting medications approved. I deal with this every month. It's like
there's been every month for medications, but even in terms of other situations, there's been, I'm not going to say which doctors, but there's been multiple doctors who have reached out and said, well, if you don't want to do X, Y, and Z, which is very minimal thing, then he might have to have another brain surgery. So do you want to do that instead? They kind of have to talk to them in that way. And we've had many denials, it's crazy for sure.
So, what I'm hearing as a strategy is having your doctors kind of advocate on your behalf too, and pushing
100%. Yeah. You need to have your doctors on the same page. Especially in I feel like if you have a good doctor, they'll always kind of be on your same page, and they'll always kind of advocate for your kids. And we're lucky enough to have those. But if you don't have that doctor, then I would say, honestly, find one who is willing to just kind of go to bat, because it's a lot for them too. He's one of, hundreds of patients that these guys have. And
totally.
All of our doctors all of our therapists are very willing to kind of, fight for him, because they care, and we're very lucky in that regard. Because I think that we've heard some other stories where they're just oh no, it was denied. You can handle it yourself, right? Or, something. And you just can't.
And the other big takeaway, I will say, that just from being in the epilepsy community that we are in now, it's really easy to get comfortable with the first doctor you see, but for whatever condition your kid has, you need to find the expert. And the first doctor may tell you things because, for example, Dr. Hussein, we can say this. He's I'm very aggressive. He goes, if you went to another neuro center, they would say no seizures, no new treatment. And he's like, I don't like the brain waves, and I need to give new treatment. And we had this conversation 2 weeks ago. And
well, because he 100% will have a seizure if we don't treat it, is kind of his theory. Yeah.
But the point is, he said other doctors would say, we don't need to do anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that you're kind of hitting on a point here, which is any practitioner has, a disposition for the level of intensity that they, kind of recommend. Some are more conservative, some are more liberal, and oh, it's fine. And so I feel like figuring out what resonates with you, and also, in a situation where it's so life-threatening in a lot of ways and so serious, making sure that, your doctor is taking it as seriously as they should.
That's said really well. And I actually will kind of add on to that. We also are the parents and who want the home run. We want to it's not there are people who don't feel comfortable doing that. There's a lot of parents who would never have done surgeries, so you have to respect everyone's decision and like whatever doctor vibes with you 100%. But we personally both, thankfully, because also parents can be on different sides.
Totally.
Like that I've heard many stories where one parent is like, let's get a surgery. And the other parent's like, absolutely not. So, you know, we're fortunate that all three of us, like, you know, his neurological team sort of are on the same page. But, you know, if not, that could cause a lot of issues. And you have to just find someone that like you, who does the things that you trust in your gut also as parents, you know? So I respect that as well. Like if you don't choose to do it our way, 100% get it. Yeah. But like it works for us.
Amanda, I'm curious what your kind of takeaways in this journey has been.
Oof. Life throws you a lot of curveballs. I always knew that. I didn't know it for me this big of one. I also feel thankfully we have a disorder that does not affect his personality and his happiness. So I'm very, very grateful for that. He is probably one of the happiest kids I know. And so I'm super, super grateful for that aspect of it. I mean, just an anecdote, I guess. I was speaking to another mom. Obviously, I'm not going to mention names, but she has 2 kids, and one is severely has pretty severe epilepsy, some infantile spasms, some other things going on. Basically, like also same thing. She's like, "How is this kid like just the happiest kid I've ever seen? It's like it's so beautiful, it's so amazing." And her other kid, she's like, "We've spent so much time, and I actually realized like, oh my God, my other kid is who I actually should be worried about because they're having, you know, some emotional issues. They're having they might need some therapy. Like they seem like a little bit depressed." And it's like I think kind of as a medical mom, trying to always make sure, since we have another sibling especially, me and that mom just spoke about it, just kind of trying to also to like not only focus on your medical kid, kind of trying to also spend a lot of time and emphasis on your other child because they pick up on things way quicker and emotionally way quicker, and just making sure that they're okay and happy. And thankfully our daughter is like very happy as well, but like I wouldn't say happier than my son, who's like, you know, going through all this stuff, has to take all this medicine, has to go to like EEGs, has to go to an IVIG, has to do surgeries. Like they're probably equally the same, you know? So I think it says a lot to like my son's strength, I guess. I'm incredibly proud of him.
I think you touched on a really important point of the sibling experience. You know, when you have a child that has such complex needs and needs all the therapy and all the doctor's appointments, it can feel really hard, I think, for a sibling, especially as the sibling gets older. And, you know, I think there's a beauty to the experience because it teaches, you know, compassion and grace and, you know, about, you know, neurodiversity and, you know, all of these things. But I do, you know, understand how hard it can be as a sibling.
Yeah, I mean, even like her, I feel like I've been told by a few, like, you know, of our school parents or friends of our daughters or this and that, you know, just because of Mav's condition, like, I feel like it's given like everyone else like such a eye-opening experience in sort of the medical arena. So it's been nice. And Vivian is definitely also not like if they're alone together, it's very different. But she had an experience the other day where someone was sort of throwing balls and kind of hurting my son, and she took him out. So I know that she's going to be a fierce protector.
She took the person that was throwing the balls and was protecting our son. Is what you're saying.
Yes. That's so great. I want to transition a little bit to kind of your therapy journey. Obviously, this is a podcast about AAC. Obviously, that's why you guys, you know, got my name. We got started together. You know, I'll share just a little bit about the complexity of Maverick. He has not been an easy case clinically. You know, he has a lot of challenges with motor, with vision, with attention, having his body kind of do what he wants it to do has been a challenge. And so AAC has been quite a journey. We've trialed different systems. We've changed the size. We've gone to vision specialists. We've kind of done a lot. And I'm pointing this out because I feel like sometimes in our community, we have this idea of like, we do an assessment, we get an AAC device, we just like, here we go, let's do it. And it's not always so cut and dry. And I definitely have experienced that with Maverick. Even to this day, we're still kind of trying to tweak and adapt and shift based on kind of what he's showing. We've also had the experience of him kind of building up some skills and then us losing some of those skills, which I think is very reflective of children that have a diagnosis of epilepsy. And so I'm just curious from your side of things, what has your experience been with therapists? I know you have a huge team and I'm so grateful to be a part of it and have been a part of it for a long time. But, for parents out there who are listening, what have you learned as far as the therapy journey and finding the right people to kind of support your son?
I would say, how holistically everything matters. So speech, PT, OT, obviously ABA, because he's, diagnosed with autism as well. How they all intertwine and how you need all of them to work together to basically get progress. And, I would have never known this if we just had Vivian and she just kind of like, went on her way and just became a normal developed kid, but when you need help, they all intertwine, and it's so clear to me that they all need to work together to basically kind of leverage each other off to get results for each other. Amanda,
it's also I 100% agree. I think it's also really nice when they're able to bounce ideas off of each other. Like Anna was mentioning ABA, they're with him, 40 hours a week. And so they're able to implement a lot of the goals that speech, PT, OT, even like our vision doctor, everything, some other specialists need him to do. They're able to like be hands-on with him and they're great. And everyone on our team, thankfully, is great. But we've had some personalities that we've had to like weed out in the past, 100%. And it's really nice when everyone that you do get on a team with kind of works together and realize it's kind of the same thing. Like, I was speaking about the doctors, like everyone needs to be in it for the right reason. It's just like, you need to be on our team. You need to be going for Maverick and like kind of putting, egos aside, because there's also not combative, but different opinions, but it's also really conflicting opinions. And it's actually really nice to hear those though, because you're like, oh, I didn't think about that that way. And as a therapist, I think, like obviously like you and everyone on our team, honestly, sometimes if someone's like, no, I don't like that idea, then having a team that's able to say like, wow, okay, I'm going to change it. Like that's really valuable because you're thinking about the kid and having team meetings like as much as possible. And they like, I always am like, oh my gosh, we're going to have an hour team meeting. And by the hour 50 or 55 minutes in, I'm like, oh my God, how are we going to get through this? Like, I feel like I could talk for like, 3 hours. So it's really nice to, just like jump on the phone, jump on the Zooms, be in constant communication, all the emails, whatever it is.
And I think it's also the other thing, just like parents just need to be honest with themselves about what their kids' needs are. Because it's easy to be like, hey, oh, my kid's fine. And, if you're more honest with it, you can get the help better.
Totally. I think there's like a lot of denial sometimes of where, a child's at. And I don't discount that experience at all, because I think it's really hard to accept when your child is not developing, with a typical trajectory and what that looks like and what the ramifications are. But if we can't have an honest conversation about where a child's at, we're not able to fully come in and really help them get to where we want them to be. And so I think that's a good point. I also want to share that one of my favorite things about working with you guys as a family and just our team is that not every family understands the importance of collaboration and prioritizes it the way that you guys do. And I think that it makes all the difference in the world, especially when you're working with a child that has complex needs. Having those team meetings where everybody contributes through their own experience and lens helps us all understand this child in front of us in a very holistic way. And we're able to then in our sessions start integrating all the different disciplines. And we just know that that's how our kids make progress, especially when learning becomes hard and we need so much repetition and exposure in order to learn new skills sometimes. So I feel like you guys have done a really good job of prioritizing that. And I just think it makes a huge difference when we're thinking about therapeutic outcomes.
Yeah, no, totally. I think we talked about this last week when we had our catch up. The term radical candor is super important because everyone needs to kind of put their egos aside because if you're on the team for Maverick, all we care about is Maverick's progress. And if people have emotions, on someone else conflicting with them, as a parent, I don't give a shit. How are we going to get to the best possible outcome? And that's all that matters as parents.
And I think from the therapeutic side, you guys know me. I'm like, yeah. I'm radically honest. And I feel like sometimes it's hard to say hard things sometimes. And sometimes as clinicians, we have to say hard things. And I think it's not always easy. And sometimes the conversations become a little uncomfortable. But I also think, we have to give our honest opinions. And sometimes it makes those team meetings a little tricky to navigate and a little tense at times. But to your point, Anand, it's like we have to remember the focus is on Maverick. And that's our focus. That's what we care about. We want to make progress. And, sometimes when we have conflicting opinions, to your point, Amanda, I think it opens up a beautiful discussion where we're able to, make decisions and collaborate with each other. We're not always going to agree, but we can find ways to have these really healthy, honest conversations so that we can get to a really good place together.
Yeah, totally. And
absolutely.
I mentioned this last week too, that Maverick is effectively a small business. And how would you run your business? You want to have the best outcome. So when you run a small business, you have to make tough decisions and you have to take emotion out of it.
No, it's such a good point. And I love that analogy. I laughed real hard when I heard it last week. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. It's a small business. A little Maverick is the face of the brand. Oh, so cute. Tell me a little bit about your experience with AAC, just because we all know it's not easy. It's not easy for Maverick. It's not easy to implement. It's like, we're spending so much time and energy trying to support communication. I'm just curious what your perspective is there. Any, of course, lessons that you've learned, but also some of the challenges. Like it's not easy. And so just your kind of honest experience with having a child who has challenges with communication and is using AAC.
I think definitely one of the biggest challenges was us figuring out his eyesight. I think figuring out the program and how big the icons could be, that was really tricky for us. Also, he has definitely a peripheral vision issue, which we knew from the beginning that for sure. We didn't actually know it was on both sides until probably a year and a half ago. But that's just because of the resection of his brain. It automatically goes on both sides. But that was probably the trickiest, I think, in finding the right program. I mean, honestly, it's a ton of trial and error, I think, with AAC, and also figuring out if we need a key guard, figuring out how many icons on a page. It's also difficult. And then also I think one aspect was difficult also is sort of your conversation with us when you were like, we need to really focus primarily on AAC. Like we have to like kind of put a pause on like the actual verbalization speech, like not like put a pause, but like we can't focus on that during our 1 hour, 1 hour a day, intense sessions. And that was kind of hard. That was hard for us, I think, because, my greatest goal would be for him to speak. And he's gone through different phases of it, but if it's not coming out natural, then we have to give him a way to communicate, is, sort of like the way that you've phrased it. And that makes complete sense, because he would be frustrated. He'll be angry. He'll be upset. He'll be, I need him to be able to verbalize in some form, just not with his mouth, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a perfect example of a hard conversation, and never an easy one. And it's so hard as a clinician, because when we started, he was really little, and we did see so much change. I circle back, and it's like he's saying words, he's approximating, and then a couple months later, he's not really vocalizing at all anymore. And so, we always hope that we can help, a child communicate verbally if they're able to do that and they're showing progress. I've always been a big advocate of just supporting total communication for him in all the different modalities, especially when children are younger, just because we don't know what's going to become easiest. And there were moments in time in his journey where absolutely verbal approximations and words were easier for him than AAC.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it just becomes really tricky, over time, as we've kind of seen those peaks and valleys and changes in his, abilities at any given time to verbalize and approximate and imitate. It gets to a point where I'm like, okay, like we need to have something more consistent, because it became so inconsistent. But it's never an easy conversation to have, just because, we hope that we're able to, support verbal communication if children are able to do that. And the other thing is, it's like, he could still like start verbalizing and approximating. It's just like he's kind of all over the map, and we never really know with certainty what's going to happen. But I did have that honest conversation with you guys about like really putting a lot of emphasis and energy into AAC to build his language skills, just because that becomes so important, that he's understanding what we're saying and then able to start communicating expressively with us. And I think when we did that, we did see a big improvement in his ability to use AAC, because everyone was kind of supporting that modality with more intention and effort. So yeah, I'm curious, Anand, what you think about kind of that conversation, what your experience has been.
No, I mean, obviously I echo the same sentiment that Amanda said. Yeah, you want your kid to talk, but if he can't talk, you need to communicate differently. And I think the AAC device it's tough for, at least for Maverick. I don't know how it is for other kids. Obviously we've only dealt with Maverick, because it takes like we've talked about, like the motor planning, the attention span, the ability to sit and actually like point to things. Those things aren't easy. And, I see him getting frustrated because he just wants his like next thing, whether it's a snack, whether it's to go jump, whether it's to do anything. And I obviously see the importance of it, but it is challenging for kids.
Yeah, it's especially challenging, I think, because he has shown us that he really struggles with some of the motor planning aspects. Like we see him, going to a button and then he's like, not that one. And like looking and trying to kind of tell his body how to, hit that icon. And when he hits the wrong one, then like continuing to kind of hit other ones to get to the right place. And so I think that motor planning challenge is really, really big for him, and for many students. But, I think that has been hard. And I also think that AAC is this like extra thing. It's like, well, we have to have the AAC device. We have to be modeling on AAC. It just becomes, this extra thing that we have to kind of consider, and it's extra work too, right?
It's extra work. Yeah, for sure.
For him,
for everyone. Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. But necessary.
Yes, exactly. And meaningful once students start learning those motor plans and start making progress, and we can start, hearing their voice more consistently. It's like, okay, all this effort and energy is worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything else that we haven't kind of covered? Any other anecdotes you want to share, or kind of like final thoughts?
Trying to think. What do you think on it?
Yeah, we could wrap up on this. I know you have a lot of clinicians and people in the space where kids need help. Here's my one thing I want to communicate, because we're dealing with this currently. No private school in Los Angeles will allow a shadow. And it doesn't matter. And it's our burden. It's our financial burden to bring a shadow. Mm-hmm. And all these schools in LA pretend to be progressive and, inclusive, but hey, there's a kid with needs. They don't give a they don't care. They don't want to help kids. It's like, oh no, you do it over there. And they pretend to be all inclusive and, oh, we're trying to be diverse and this and that. And it was very eye-opening in the last year, because we've kind of gone through this journey, and it's just disappointing because of the way they present themselves. If you want to present yourself as this exclusive, we only want the best kids, whatever, fine. But you don't do that. You pretend that you want to have this like all-inclusive group, and it's very frustrating. I just want people to be honest
about this.
I just want people to be honest. No, just be honest. Yeah. Like, hey, we don't want anyone that has needs.
Yeah.
It's been very disappointing for 100%, because we had the very different, just to make it very clear, in terms of preschools, we go to an amazing preschool who opened up with open arms. Any therapist can come anytime. They're incredible. But also not only them, we've actually had, I think we had like 6 other preschools that were like willing to take us within a month of applying, that were totally into it. So preschool, I think across the board, is a very different situation than any sort of elementary school. Once in kindergarten,
he's got to disappear.
Yeah, he's got to take a step back. Yeah,
I know,
and that's frustrating.
Totally.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Guess what? You have a shadow, so he's not disrupting class. If he's having issues, the shadow will take him out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, I think it speaks to like a larger issue of just inclusion and how hard it is for kids with disabilities to be included in schools, in classrooms, even with schools that, are geared towards inclusion and have opportunities, it's like our kid with, a disability is at the back of the class. So like, even if you are included, do you feel like you belong? Right. Like there's,
even the public school, like that obviously, they have to take him 100%, and they've actually been great. But it's also this, it's a bummer that it's like he's not going to be in a general ed class for a majority of the day. Like, he can do recess, he can do art maybe.
And if you just think about it kind of macro, you're compounding kids not getting better by not including them.
Well, I think also like our son, especially, which frustrates us, does really well with neurotypical kids. He really like feeds off of them. The kids at his school are so adorable and like in his face and trying to include him. And I think they've also learned a lot. A lot of his parents, a lot of their parents have said, in terms of that. And I just feel like everyone's the better for it. But, it's difficult to have to like, be like, oh, preschool was preschool. Now we have to kind of enter the real world. Sucks.
That's my TED talk, and we can wrap up.
Oh, I know. I mean, that's going to really speak to a lot of our audience, because they're like, yes, like, why are we not including kids more? It's like one of our biggest challenges in the work that we do. It's sad.
It's so stupid.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys taking the time, sharing your experience. If people want to contact you, how do they go about finding you?
Oh, Instagram is probably the easiest, right? Or I mean, obviously, if anyone wants to contact us through you, please give them our email. And then if not, Instagram probably is easy. Anand, what do you think?
Yeah, so yeah, you could DM us on Instagram. I'm Anand Murthy, ANANDMURTHY,
Mm-hmm.
and Amanda.
Amanda Jane, AMANDA Jane, JANE, Murthy, MURTHY.
Yeah.
Happy to connect with anyone on email or whatever.
Yeah, email. Easiest probably is through email, so we actually like see it because it'll come from you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We'll share those in the show notes. And I also know that you guys have a GoFundMe that you linked in the show notes. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So we have a basically to support infantile spasms research that Dr. Hussein, who's the leading person in the world on this specific epilepsy.
He's out of UCLA.
And we've been raising money for the last 4 years. I'm actually on the board of the UCLA Children's Hospital, Mattel, and been very involved in trying to basically bring infantile spasms to the forefront of what people care about, because it matters.
Definitely for beds, awareness, but 100%.
Who gets beds, who gets like all the different departments in a children's hospital compete for who gets, first bed. So for example, when we first got diagnosed, it took us 48 hours to even get a bed, which is ridiculous. And, now we're obviously involved in the hospital, so it doesn't take that time, but all these things matter. And we're just trying to promote epilepsy awareness, specifically infantile spasms, and
also a lot of drug trials, just quickly mentioned, because any sort of new medicine in the field is very, very, very difficult to get any sort of testing. So all these drugs like Mavs, I don't know, what do you think he's on? Like he's failed probably 15 at this point. All these new ones need to kind of just get out there and get tested. And the one that actually has worked for 8 months and 10 months on him was technically in adult medicine, which they need a lot more research on as well. So just research for his condition specifically, but also just epilepsy in general, 100%. Like if you want to donate to those, ours is very specific to infantile spasms. Just because, and last thing just to mention, we've gone through a lot of fundraising for this and, spoke to a lot of people, our doctor and stuff. And the reason why a lot of kids' conditions don't get funded is because a lot of people who have money are a lot older. And so they become 60, their grandparents or their parents rather, died from Alzheimer's, or they died from another brain disease. And so the focus and their money go towards a lot of elder diseases, or, like a general disease too, that's like can affect everyone, like cancer.
There's a massive age bias in terms of how philanthropy and pediatrics is massively underfunded.
Yes.
Under all causes.
We're definitely going to link to that. So I definitely encourage our listeners to check it out and to donate if they can. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure as always. I love being a part of your team, and I love that you guys are so open and willing to share. I think that really helps other families in similar situations. And it's always great to get a parent perspective on the whole process and their journey with AAC. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Rachel. We love you. We love you so much. We love Alyssa and everyone on your team. And thank you for everything.
Thank you. Of course. So for Talking with Tech, I'm Rachel Meadle, joined by Anand and Amanda Murthy. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.